Regardless of the structure you use and the genre you're working in, the first act is arguably the most crucial part of your story. It's the part that sets the stage, introduces key characters and conflicts, and establishes expectations. If done poorly, it can be the only part of your story the audiences engage with before checking out entirely. In this video, we're going to explore what makes the first act work and what happens when it doesn't by analyzing two well-known franchises, Harry Potter and Divergent. Through this comparison, we'll break down the essential elements every first act needs, discuss different structural approaches, and see where one story succeeded while the other fell flat. The beginning of the story is where the audience decides whether they like what they're watching or reading. As writers, it's crucial to think of the first act as the foundation that will either support the weight of the rest of your story or cause it to collapse. This part of your story is where the expectations for the audiences are set, and if those expectations aren't met or the groundwork isn't laid properly, there's little chance of keeping them engaged. The first act isn't just a few introductory scenes. It's a delicate balance of world building, character development, thematic exploration, and the setup for the conflict that will define your story. A key part of this is introducing the layers of conflict that will carry the narrative forward. Every story has multiple layers of conflict, external, internal, and thematic. In the first act, it's essential to either show or hint at each of these, even if the full conflict doesn't unfold until later. When plotting a story, having an overall idea of the ending is important, especially when constructing a cohesive first act. The setup in the beginning will lead directly into the main conflicts of the second and third acts, and ultimately to the story's resolution. That's why establishing strong thematic and character-driven conflicts early on is vital. In traditional three-act structure, the first act is referred to as the setup or exposition. In Blake Snyder's Save the Cat structure, for example, this act contains several key plot bits that set up the stakes and introduce important elements for the story. But regardless of whether you follow the three-act structure, Snyder's beats, or some other framework, the first act always serves the same purpose: introducing your world, your character, the conflicts, and your themes. Let's take a closer look at two first acts, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and Divergent. Both of these stories belong to large franchises, but the way they handle the first act is vastly different. By dissecting these films, we can see clearly what works and what doesn't. Character introduction: Harry Potter versus Tris. A complete first act begins by introducing the main character, who serves as the central focus of the story. In Harry Potter, we meet Harry, a young boy who's lived an extraordinary yet miserable life. He's an orphan who lives with abusive relatives, which immediately elicits sympathy from the audience. But Harry isn't just a pitiful character. He's also curious, disobedient, and has a sense of adventure. These qualities give him dimensions and make him feel human. He isn't perfect, he breaks rules and sometimes gets into trouble, but these flaws are what makes him relatable and endearing. In Divergent, we're introduced to Tris, the protagonist of the series. While Tris starts as an underdog, her character lacks the flaws and complexities that make Harry compelling. She's portrayed as a nice, determined girl, but that's about it. Her journey in the first movie mostly revolves around physical challenges and the development of her bravery, but her internal struggle isn't deeply explored. This is one of the fundamental flaws in her character. Without significant internal conflict, there's little room for growth. The audience is left with a protagonist who's functional for the plot but not compelling on a personal level. A well-rounded character requires both strengths and flaws. These are what drives their choices and interactions with the world around them. Harry, for example, often makes decisions that reveal his bravery, kindness, and curiosity, but they also reveal his impulsive nature and tendency to act with without thinking through the consequences. These moments of choice give us insight into who Harry is and set him on a path toward growth. Tris, on the other hand, seems to make decisions primarily to advance the plot rather than explore her character. Her stubbornness and determination to prove herself are admirable, but they're not enough to carry the weight of an entire story. A character's choices should have lasting impacts on the narrative and provide opportunities for growth. In Divergent, Tris's choices feel more like plot devices than moments of genuine character development. Introducing the main conflict. Establishing the main character is only part of the equation. The first act must also introduce both the external and internal conflicts that will shape the story. The external conflict usually takes the form of an antagonist or opposing force, while the internal conflict revolves around the character's personal struggles and growth. Both of these elements need to be introduced in the first act to give the story momentum. In Harry Potter, the external conflict is embodied by Voldemort, the dark wizard who killed Harry's parents and now seeks to regain power. Even though Voldemort doesn't play a large role in the first film, his presence looms over the story and we get hints of the larger conflict to come. This external conflict is tied closely to Harry's internal struggle. He's a young boy who has to learn what it means to be a wizard, to belong to a new world, and to confront the legacy of his parents. The external and internal conflicts are intertwined, making Harry's journey one of both external danger and personal discovery. In Divergent, the external conflict is introduced through the political system of factions, and later the villainous leader, Janine Matthews. However, Janine isn't clearly established as an antagonist early on, and when she does become a threat, it feels sudden and underdeveloped. This weakens the external conflict, making it feel disconnected from Tris's personal journey. Without a clear antagonist or well-developed internal conflict, the stakes feel lower and the audience isn't as invested in Tris's success. One of the strengths of Harry Potter is how the external conflict, Voldemort's rising to power, is closely tied to the internal conflict, Harry's struggle to understand his place in the wizarding world and as a person. This connection keeps the story engaging and ensures that every obstacle Harry faces feels meaningful. Thematic elements. Another crucial element of the first act is establishing the themes of the story. Themes are the underlying messages or truths that the writer wants the audience to uncover. These themes often revolve around moral or philosophical conflicts, which are expressed through the characters and their interactions. In Harry Potter, the central theme is the battle between the good and evil, embodied by the opposing values of Harry and Voldemort. Harry believes in the importance of kindness, loyalty, and courage, while Voldemort believes in power and dominance at any cost. This theme is introduced early in the first film, even before Voldemort becomes a direct threat. As the story progresses, Harry is faced with choices that test his beliefs, and each of these choices reinforces a thematic conflict. In Divergent, the themes revolve around individuality and conformity, but they aren't as clearly established in the first act. While the faction system is introduced and we see Tris struggle with her place in it, the larger philosophical conflict doesn't emerge until much later in the film. As a result, the theme doesn't feel intertwined with the narrative, and the story lacks the depth that makes Harry Potter so compelling. The inciting incident. The first act usually contains the inciting incident, the moment that pushes the protagonist into the main action of the story. This is the spark that ignites the narrative and sets the character on their journey, whether it's literal or metaphorical. The inciting incident is crucial because it reveals the first major shift in the protagonist's life, forcing them to leave behind their old world and enter a new one. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the inciting incident of the entire franchise is Harry's first encounter with Voldemort at the climax of the film. This pivotal moment reveals the true stakes of Harry's world and the dangers he faces. Up until this point, Harry's journey into the magical world, his friendships, and the challenges at Hogwarts have been about discovery and self-exploration. But when he comes face to face with Voldemort, who's attempting to return to full power, it marks the first time Harry confronts the dark force that will define his life. This moment pushes him out of the relative safety of school life and shows that the conflict between the good and evil is not abstract. It's real, dangerous, and personal. On the other hand, Divergent lacks a clear inciting incident within the frame of the franchise, which creates a structural weakness. Unlike Harry Potter, where the inciting incident firmly sets up the central conflict between Harry and Voldemort, Divergent doesn't establish a moment that launches the broader narrative of the trilogy. While Triss makes significant decisions like choosing the Dauntless faction, there isn't a single pivotal event that clearly defines the stakes or introduces a franchise-wide antagonist in the same way Voldemort does in Harry Potter. That's all I have for today. If I missed anything out, make sure to comment them below, and I'll see you next time.